Swanns Way, starting at page 45. And so without joy would she welcome us, commiserate with us, though we did not yet have finer weather, the day of our arrival just before Easter, when there was often an icy wind, while mamma would ask her for news of her daughter and her nephews, whether her grandson was a pretty child, what they were planning to make of him, whether he was going to be like his grandmother. And when there was no one else there, mamma, knowing that Francois still mourned her parents who had died many years ago, would talk to her about them gently, ask her for 1,000 details about what sort of life they led. She had guessed that Francois did not like her son-in-law, and that he spoiled the pleasure she took in being with her daughters, with whom she could not chat as freely when he was there. And so when Francois went to see them, a few leagues from Combray, mamma would say to her, smiling, "Isn't it so, Francois, if Julien is obliged to be away, and you have Marguerite all to yourself all day long, you'll be sorry, but you'll make the best of it?" And Francois would say, laughing, "Madame knows everything. Madame is worse than those X-rays." She said X with an affected difficulty, and took a smile to poke fun at herself, an ignorant woman for using that erudite term. That they brought in for Mademoiselle Octave, and that see what you have in your heart. And disappeared, embarrassed that someone was paying attention to her, perhaps so that we would not see her cry. Mamma was the first person who gave her that sweet sensation, the feeling that her life as a countrywoman, her sorrows, her joys, could be of some interest, and could be a reason for pleasure or sadness in someone other than herself. My aunt was resigned to managing with less help from her during our stay, knowing how much my mother appreciated the service of this maid, who was so intelligent and active, who was as handsome at 5 o'clock in the morning in her kitchen under a bonnet whose dazzling rigid flutes appeared to be made of porcelain, as when she was going to high mass, who did everything well, working like a horse whether she was in good health or not, but without a fuss, as though it were nothing, the only one of my aunt's maids who, when mamma asked for hot water or black coffee, brought them really boiling. She was one of those servants who, in a household, are at the same time those most immediately displeasing to a stranger, perhaps because they do not bother to win him over and are not attentive to him, knowing very well they have no need of him, that one would stop seeing him rather than dismiss them, and who are, on the other hand, those most valued by masters, who have tested their real capacities and do not care about the superficial charm, the servile chatter that makes a favorable impression on a visitor, but that often cloaks in an ineducable incompetence. When Francois, having seen that my parents had everything they needed, went back for the first time to give my aunt her pepsin and ask what she would like to have for lunch, it was quite rare that she was not already required to offer an opinion or provide explanations about some event of importance. Francois, imagine, Madame Goupil went past more than a quarter of an hour late going to fetch her sister. If she lingers along the way, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they were to arrive after the elevation. Well, there wouldn't be anything astonishing about that, answered Francois. If you had come 5 minutes earlier, you would have seen Madame Imbert go past carrying some asparagus twice as fat as Monsieur? haven't seen this one before. M-E-R. Mare. Mother. Great. Sorry. Twice as fat as Mare Charlotte's. Now try to find out from her maid where she got them. You've been serving us asparagus in every sauce this year. You of all people might have found some like those for our travelers. It wouldn't be surprising if they came from Monsieur le Curé, said Francois. Ah, do you expect me to believe that, my poor Francois? Answered my aunt, shrugging her shoulders. From Monsieur le Curé? You know very well he only grows wretched, spindly little asparagus. I tell you these were as fat as a woman's arm. Not your arm, of course, but one like mine, poor thing, which has gotten so much thinner again this year. Francois, didn't you hear those chimes that nearly split my head open? No, Madame Octave. Oh, my poor girl, you must have a hard head. You can thank the good Lord for that. It was Maguelone coming to get Dr. Pepperald. He came back out with her right away, and they turned down the Rue de l'Oiseau. Some child must be ill. Oh my, dear God, sighed Francois, who could not hear of a misfortune occurring to a stranger, even in a distant part of the world, without beginning to lament. Francois, now, who were they ringing the passing bell for? Oh, dear God, it must have been from Mademoiselle Rousseau. I'm blessed if I hadn't forgotten that she passed away the other night. Oh, it's time for the good Lord to call me home. I don't know what I've done with my head since my poor Octave died. But I'm wasting your time, my girl. Not at all, Madame Octave. My time is not so precious. He who made it did not sell it to us. I'm only just going to see that my fire isn't out. In this way, Francois and my aunt together appraised, during that morning session, the first events of the day. But sometimes those events assumed a character so mysterious and so grave that my aunt felt she could not wait for the moment when Francois would come up, and 4 astounding peals of a bell would echo through the house. But, Madame Octave, isn't it time for your pepsin again? Francois would say, were you feeling faint? Not at all, Francois, my aunt would say. What I mean is, yes. You very well know there is seldom a time now when I don't feel faint. One day I'll pass like Mademoiselle Rousseau, without even time to collect myself, but that's not why I rang. Would you believe that I just saw Madame Goupil as clearly as I see you now, with a little girl who I don't know at all. Now go fetch 2 sous worth of salt at Camos's. It's not often that Theodore can't tell you who someone is. But that'll be Monsieur Pepin's daughter, Francois would say, preferring to be satisfied with immediate explanations, since she had already been to Camos's twice that morning. Monsieur Pepin's daughter? Oh, do you expect me to believe that, my poor Francois? And do you think I wouldn't have recognized her? But I don't mean the big one, Madame Octave. I mean the little one that's away at school in Juilly. I think I saw her already once this morning. Ah, that must be it, said my aunt. She must have come for the holidays, that's it. There's no need to ask. She will have come for the holidays. But then, any time now, we might very likely see Madame Cesaret come and ring at her sister's for lunch. That's what it is. I saw Galopin's boy going past with a tart. You see, the tart was on its way to Madame Goupil's. Once Madame Goupil has a visitor, Madame Octave, it won't be long before you see all her folk coming back for lunch. Because it's not so early as it was, said Francois, who in a hurry. to go back down and see to lunch, was not sorry to leave my aunt to the prospect of this distraction. "Oh, not before noon," answered my aunt in a tone of resignation, casting an uneasy glance at the clock, yet furtively, so as not to let it be seen that she, who had renounced everything, nevertheless still took a lively pleasure in learning whom Madame Goupil was having to lunch, a pleasure that would unfortunately have to wait a little more than an hour longer. "And on top of that, it will happen during my lunch," she added half aloud to herself. Her lunch was enough of a distraction for her, so she did not wish for another one at the same time. "Now, you won't forget to give me my eggs with cream in a flat plate." These were the only plates with pictures on them, and my aunt amused herself at each meal by reading the inscription on the one she was served that day. She would put on her glass and spell out Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, or Aladdin and the Magic Lamp, and smile, saying, "Very good, very good." "I would certainly have gone to Masseuse," Francois would say, seeing now that my aunt would not send her there. No, it's not worth the trouble any more. It's certainly Mademoiselle Pupin. "My poor Francois, I'm sorry to have made you come up for nothing." But my aunt knew perfectly well it was not for nothing that she had rung for Francois, since in Combray a person whom one did not know at all was a creature as scarcely believed as a mythological god. And, in fact, one could not remember when, any time one of these stupefying apparitions had occurred, in the Rue de Saint-Esprit or on the square, well-conducted research had not ended by reducing the fabulous character to the proportion of a person one knew, either personally or abstractly, in his or her civil status, as having such and such a degree of kinship with some people of Combray. It was Madame Suttin's son, returning from military service, Abbé Perdreau's niece, leaving the convent, the cure's brother, a tax collector at Châteaudun, who had just retired and come to spend the holiday. One had, upon seeing them, the shock of believing that they were in Combray, people whom one did not know at all, simply because one did not recognize them right away. And yet, long in advance, Madame Sutton and the cure had let everyone know that they were awaiting their travelers. When in the evening I went upstairs after returning home to describe our walk to my aunt, if I was so imprudent as to tell her that we had met near Pont-Vieux, a man my grandmother did not know, my grandfather did not know. "A man grandfather did not know at all?" she would cry. "I don't believe it." Nonetheless, somewhat disturbed by this news, she would want to clear the matter up. My grandfather would be summoned. "Now, who did you meet at Pont-Vieux, uncle?" "A man you didn't know?" "But I did know him," my grandfather would answer. "It was Prosper, the brother of Madame Villefbouff's garden." "Ah, that's right," my aunt would say, calmed and a little flushed, shrugging her shoulders with an ironic smile. And she would add, "Now, he told me he had met a man you didn't know." And they would advise me to be more circumspect the next time and not go on agitating my aunt with thoughtless remarks. One knew everyone so well in Combray, both animals and people, that if my aunt had chanced to see a dog pass by whom she did not know at all, she would not stop thinking about it and devoting to this incomprehensible fact all her talent for induction and her hours of leisure. "Oh, that must be Madame Cesaret's dog," Francois would say, without great conviction, but in order to pacify my aunt, and so that she would not split her head. "As if I didn't know Madame Cesaret's dog," my aunt would answer, her critical mind not accepting a fact so easily. "Ah, then it would be the new dog, Sieur Crepin brought back from Lisieux. That must be it. It seems quite an affable creature, added Francois, who had got the information from Theodore. As a clever person, always in good humor, always friendly, and always as agreeable as you may wish. It's uncommon for an animal of that age to be so well behaved already. Madame Octave, I will have to leave you. I haven't had time to enjoy myself. Here it's almost 10 o'clock, and my stove not yet lit. I still have my asparagus to scrape. What, Francois? More asparagus? Why, you've got a regular mania for asparagus this year. Will you make our Parisians grow tired of it? Why, no, Madame Octave. They're very fond of it. You'll see, they'll come home from church with a good appetite, and they won't push it about with the backs of their spoons. Church? Why, they must already be there. You do well not to waste any time. Go and look after your lunch. While my aunt was conferring thus with Francois, I was going to mass with my parents. How I loved it! How clearly I can see it again, our church. The old porch by which we entered, black-pocked like a skimming ladle, was uneven and deeply hollowed at the edges, like the font to which it led us. As if the gentle brushing of the country women's cloaks as they entered the church, and of their timid fingers taking holy water could, repeated over centuries, acquire a destructive force, bend the stones and carve it with furrows, like those traced by the wheel of a cart in a boundary stone which knocks against every day. Its tombstones, under which the noble dust of the abbots of Cambrai, who were buried there, formed for the choir a sort of spiritual pavement, were themselves no longer inert and hard matter, for the time had softened them and made them flow in like honey beyond the bounds of their own square shapes, which, in one place, they had overrun in a flaxen billow, carrying off on their drift a flowery Gothic capital letter, drowning the white violets of the marble, and into which, elsewhere, they had reabsorbed themselves, further contracting the elliptical Latin inscription, introducing a further caprice in the arrangement of those abridged characters, bringing close together two letters of a word, of which the others had been disproportionately disdented. Its windows never sparkled as much as the day when the sun hardly appeared, so that if it was grey outside, we were sure it would be beautiful inside the church. One was filled to its very top by a single figure like a king in a game of cards, who lived up there under an architectural canopy between heaven and earth, and in whose slanting blue light on weekdays, sometimes at noon, when there was no service, at one of those rare times in the church, when the church, airy, vacant, more human, luxurious, with some sun on its rich furniture, looked almost habitable, like the hall of a medieval-style mansion. Of sculpted stone and stained glass, one would see Madame Cesarat kneel for a moment, setting down on the next parastool a packet of petites fours tied with string which she had just picked up from a pastry shop across the street and was going to take back home for lunch. In another, a mountain of pink snow, whose foot a battle was being fought. I think that's where I'm going to end. That's at page 61.